everybody for joining us for our relatively brief but hopefully very insightful session today. And the topic here is really around, again, enterprise asset management, which is something Utopia has done in the SAP and non-SAP context for about 15 years now, and really trying to focus on the data side of things. And the topic we really want to talk about today ultimately comes down to ownership. So really the question is, who owns the asset master data inside of an organization? And we'll try to explore some of the different reasons why these sort of challenges occur, and some of the things you can do to understand them better and hopefully be able to resolve them. So the first thing, let's talk about data governance in an asset or a heavy asset industry context. I've spent a big chunk of the last 3 or 4 months talking with lots of oil refiners, chemical companies, heavy manufacturers, utility organizations, and what they find is it's often easier to get master data for your car, for example, than it is to get accurate master data that represents the current state of a large heavy asset type of facility. And the stakes are certainly higher, with a facility like this than they would be with a vehicle or whatever. So a lot of times the data gets sort of overlooked, but it has a direct impact on things of how to reduce your health and safety risks, actually increasing your operational performance, and oftentimes even maintain regulatory compliance. So let's take a look at why getting this data right is so important, and we'll try to give you some examples of each. First and foremost, capital projects. Oftentimes, as you all know, when companies are taking on a new large capital-intensive project like building a new facility or expanding one, not having a really efficient mechanism to hand over all the data from the EPC contractor to the person that's going to run the company in the business as usual mode or run their ERP system can really add a huge amount of complexity. Up to 1%. If it's a $100 million construction project, that can add up to $1 million in additional costs, not to mention ongoing pain. We're actually currently working, my associate, Mike Jordan, who was supposed to be presenting today, is actually just landed in the Middle East and is going out to see a major oil producer out there who's got exactly this. They have an existing refinery, and for 7 years they've been trying to do plant maintenance with that refinery without having adequate information to let them actually go out and do their task list and work with the data. So they're absolutely committed to getting this EPC handover process correct on their current capital project, and we're advising them that and actually going to assist them in getting the data out of some of their different systems, getting it out of the manuals and the unstructured documents, and actually getting it into their plant maintenance system so they can then actually effectively work with their plant. So very, very important from a capital project standpoint, and one of the major drivers we see in the industries. Shutdowns, turnarounds are a related one. If every so often you need to stop actually using one of these facilities and do hundreds or thousands of different maintenance tasks over a 1, 2, 3 day period typically. Companies will plan these for up to 6 months at a time, and it often involves swapping out parts for the obsolescent parts for new ones, different pumps, different gauges, whatever the case may be. This can produce thousands of changes in your asset master data. So even if you did a good job when you stood up your refinery of getting the data correct, these sorts of shutdowns and turnaround situations introduce massive amounts of changes that need to then occur. In addition, if you don't have your task list, your bills of materials from the MRO standpoint, all the things you need to effectively go out and make the changes and make the repairs you need to do while the facility is shut down, you can have major problems, again, in terms of extending that shutdown turnaround period. And as you know, every day that factory or utility or power plant is up and running is costing you an awful lot of money. So again, making sure you can effectively manage shutdown turnarounds is another big driver for asset master data and figuring out who owns it. Mergers and acquisitions, this is a fairly common one as well, but as you divest or bring in other pieces of the organization, how can you do that effectively and get the data right? And for each one of these, again, going back to our question today, is who owns the data? During an EPC handover for a capital project, who owns getting the data correct? Is it the EPC company? Is it the SI that's implementing perhaps an SAP ERP system for you to manage the data side of things? Is it the company? Is it you that owns the data? So clearly defining those in the deliverables, because the SI for the SAP system is probably going to say, hey, you just give us the data, whatever you give us, we load. The EPC's guys are going to say, look, we just required to give you the data, but whether we do it via forklift, pallet load, data dump, whatever it might be. It's up to you to consume that. So figuring those sorts of things out are very very important. Regulatory compliance is a massive one. Health and safety. Really, getting all these different asset modifications that are occurring, thousands and thousands of them. If you don't actually go in and make those proper changes so that people know what sort of equipment they're dealing with, what the tolerances are, when they can and can't work on them, et cetera, it can have a direct impact on health and safety and environmental side of things. And finally, just general operational excellence. Many organizations are committed to running the best possible facilities they can, to maximizing profits, reducing the ongoing costs of maintaining these sorts of places, and again, making changes that result in a 0.5% to 1% better efficiency, or higher in-use rates for these sorts of places can really add awful lot to the top line and the bottom line of the organizations. So again, key business drivers. And now let's take a look at some of the underlying, why this is so hard and why people get so hung up on, who should own the actual data itself. And, is it the business side? Is it the IT side? Is it the contractor, et cetera? So the real challenge here, and we'll let this build out for a second, and I'll build sometimes take a time, is things can live in different places. The same piece of data lives in a lot of different places. So, a very simple example, if you've got a pump, for example, that's being used in a wide variety of uses across a factory or a facility, what is that pump? If you talk to the engineers, they're going to tell you that it's a set of CAD/CAM drawings that they created that represents what the pump looks like. And you can look at it maybe in 3 dimensions if you want to. Tell how it all fits together, and really show that's what they actually used to design and build the pump initially. So the engineers will say, we own it because we designed it, and we built out the pump, and we know what it's supposed to look like, and we contain all that knowledge in these engineering documents, and you couldn't even produce the pump if you didn't have all this information that we hold in the engineering data warehouse. And then the enterprise content management, which is the document management people, typically they're going to say, no, we know about a pump. We've got exploded parts diagrams here. We've got repair manuals. We've got installation guides. We've got again recommended maintenance procedures for these. We have lots of information about that pump, and so we own the data, and we own the pump and what's going on with it. And then thirdly, you'll have an enterprise asset management system that may be SAP. It may not be SAP, but in the SAP system itself, the SAP guys are going to say, we own this. We have function locations perhaps for this. We have an equipment description. We have an MRO bill of material, which tells me every piece part that's inside of that and what makes up that. We generate the task list to go out and fix these things. So we own the data. And generally, what the truth is that everybody owns this data. And so another thing is, as we mentioned, this data tends to change over time and needs some way to be synchronized and a way to management the different change as it occurs across these different systems, so that eventually, because the truth is, all of this information is very important when it comes to any asset information. And needs to be able to be managed, coordinated, linked, and worked with effectively. And that's exactly what you can see here. You can see in the engineering system, you've got the P&ID diagrams, electrical piping, 3D models perhaps, all the different formats this data could be in. It can be paper, it can be a scan, it can be electronic, it can be XML, it can be an image. Same thing with the documents. You can have PDFs, you can have Word documents, you can have all sorts of PNGs, images, all these different things that might exist in the document system. And then same thing in the actual system of record. You're going to have equipment lists, flocks, bombs, bills of materials, the task list, the assemblies, and everything that defines it in a more structured way is going to exist in maybe it's SAP, maybe it's Maximo. And what organizations sort of need is some way that something can sit in the middle of all this and help with all this different change that's happening, synchronize and harmonize data across all these different systems. Because what you really need, the truth is, everybody owns this information and this data, and therefore you need a way for everybody to collaborate and to know whether the change is introduced on the engineering side, from a document side, or from a data side, or maybe there's just a new pump that's come out that needs to be subbed in. How can you actually manage that in a very clean, auditable way, so that you can, handle what happens, after day one with the new refinery and capital project we were talking about earlier. So, one of the things we spend a lot of time working with companies on from both a solution and an advisory standpoint is really building out technology that helps you do that. So again, as we discussed earlier, you'll often have an engineering release, an EPC handover, maybe it's just a new piece of equipment, that's a large piece of equipment or small piece of equipment that's coming in. And again, you've got P&ID diagrams, you've got the modeling, the 3D models that are coming from engineering. There are associated data sheets that come in with that, and manuals from the manufacturer. You have to buy it, so there's purchase orders, there's material requisitions, these sorts of things. And then you've actually got to maintain and fix it and know what it's all about. And so there's actually the breakdown structures for actually doing the work against that piece of equipment and all the associated metadata that comes with each one of those areas. So really what you need to effectively manage this is kind of a staging area where all this information can come in a structured way and have work lists and task lists against it so that they can work together so they can validate that the data is all the right data about the different pieces and what system it's coming from. You can transform it so it's in a unified fashion, because the end goal is to get this data into your structured SAP system, for example, in a very easy way. And you can have your specialists from the business side and the IT side work through the data and approve the different checkpoints so that the data can flow, whether it's a bulk upload or a single request that comes out of the field. An engineer goes out to fix something and says, gosh, this isn't what it said it was going to be here. This is a different piece of equipment or a different manufacturer, and he can actually kick off, he or she can then kick off a work order that goes back and fixes that problem that they discovered in the field. Or perhaps it comes from procurement when they come in and say, we went to buy 20 more of these or one more of these and they don't make this anymore, but here's the replacement thing that we ordered instead. So how do you promulgate that in terms of which ones are the old part number, the new part number? They're functionally doing the same thing. They're really the same piece of equipment, but one's been superseded by another. How do you ensure that you continue to supersede those for consistency? And even the diagrams and different things like that. And then ultimately, once you've worked it through this staging area, you're then actually going to push the data out into the various systems of record. In this case, we very commonly find that OpenText is the document management system of choice, their extended ECM product that works with hand in hand from within SAP. Perhaps you're using SAP Enterprise Virtualization for the visualization and the 3D models that we talked about. And finally, hopefully you're using the SAP Enterprise Asset Management solution for master data governance that's built by Utopia, that's sold by SAP to handle that. And then ultimately you're reporting on the back end of that for your EHS and regulatory reporting is coming out of BW or whatever enterprise data warehouse. All that data is ultimately feeding into. So sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and build this all the way out. Give me 1 second. There we go. Excellent. That way it makes it a little easier to look at. So at the end of the day, we just talked about a very high level, sort of thing. So what does this actually look like? So, initially, if you're centrally governing this data on top of the SAP Business Suite, you would initially take all your documents that you receive and you would put these into the OpenText Extended ECM project as a package. And then ultimately you'd go through and extract the tags and the master data from those different sheets. And SAP has and Utopia has some great functionality that will pull data out of unstructured information like documents or PDFs or whatever, Word documents, et cetera, and can actually put it into a structured format that you can actually work with. So you can actually go through and build your workspaces, begin to build those out in the master data governance system, which is the SAP system for enterprise asset management that actually is doing all this linking and bringing the data into the SAP system. And then once you've got them kind of broken down into things like, functional locations, you've got equipment, you've got materials, and you can go in and work in each one of those, then finally you're going to actually, work through these staging workspaces and eventually, get the transmittal package. You've got a full audit trail as you're doing this. And then finally the data is going to flow across, into the SAP system, as well as all the master data for things like functional location, equipment master, MRO bombs, and the documents will load ultimately linked back to that, formally into the OpenText Extended ECM system, and finally into the SAP, material master or the various areas of plant maintenance that it needs to live inside of SAP. And the reasons, again, you want to do this, we've talked about this. SAP's master data governance solution it's an ECC-based product. It fully integrates if you're an SAP organization that is doing this inside of an SAP system. Even if you are running even Maximo or something like that, if you're using ECC, master data governance is really the only solution that allows you to leverage your current investments, doesn't require deployment of additional piece of technology, and really gives you a way to have a full governance model so you can get your governance, your compliance with all the auditing that you want to have with that. It ensures that your data is consistent, because what it actually does is all the business rules that get built when the data is getting pulled in during an easy handover or a new transmittal or change or whatever it might be, it uses the same business rules that you define then. So the data that you put in on day one with the system, if this is day 100 or 1000, the data looks and is the same and is all replicated and created the same with the same business rules, the same approvals, etc. And again, it's natively integrated. It reuses what you've learned, so it's actually using the SAP data model. It's something, a hierarchy already exists inside of ECC. The master data governance automatically knows about that unless your specialists work with it. It's a really flexible tool, so it comes out of the box with all the data models and the workflows you need to manage asset data, but it also is very flexible and can be tuned easily to your business processes. And then finally, it enforces data quality by using other SAP technologies, like data services or information steward, to monitor and cleanse the data as it continues to move along as new data comes through the system. So again, the core system that we're typically building on top of when we're working with clients hand in hand is SAP Master Data Governance, which again is a core ABAP ECC solution that works hand in hand with your ECC system. And then we're actually helping implement that, get the right business users engaged. So going back to who owns the master data, one of the great things about SAP MDG is it brings together someone who can make a request, and they're used to working inside an SAP system. It looks just like a normal request they use for lots of other things, but then that request actually has to go to some sort of business steward who knows a lot about a particular part of the business. They know a lot about functional locations, or they know about equipment, or whatever the case may be, so they can make sure that everything's being created correctly in an automated way through MDG. And then finally, it can go to an approver. Someone says, yes, this all looks right. Let's go ahead and create this new material master. Let's create this new piece of equipment, whatever the case may be. And all that is auditable and trackable, and you can do it on a piece-by-piece request basis, or you can do it on a very large bulk upload or bulk change process as well. So again, SAP Master Data Governance typically is the solution we see, because it's the fastest deployable, the most out-of-the-box configurable and complete, and finally gives you the quickest time to market, while still giving you these key things we've talked about in terms of auditability, traceability, and being able to manage your asset data in an effective way. Again, another piece that we often work with, and this is a companion partner of SAP's, is OpenText's Extended ECM solution. So again, what it gives you is lots of nice workspaces to work, because typically what we're seeing is that the data we often receive in these situations when we're doing the data cleanup for customers is coming in often in an unstructured document or PDF. And so again, OpenText Extended ECM, there's direct integration between, if you work with Utopia and SAP and OpenText together, there's direct integration between MDG and Extended ECM. There's also direct integration between OpenText and ECC, and all the way around the horn, so that all the solutions work seamlessly to help manage your enterprise assets effectively. So finally, that kind of takes us past the business challenges. Sort of a technology platform, which I think everybody needs some way to do this effectively, so you're not just sending emails or walking around. So it finally takes us back down to the original question, which is who is responsible or accountable for this sort of data. And again, I think this is the very first statement here is very appropriate. Master data management is about the business. The business understands their data. They know what they need out of it. They know what they do, what is important and not important to help them run their run their business on a daily basis. So they're enabled by IT. I think people often think that IT are the owners of the master data, but really, again, everybody knows inside their own organization who's the person you go to ask about this sort of question, or who's been around a long time and really understands this part of the business. And those are the people you want to engage in this process. They understand that they need to be enabled by the technology. So again, technology is a piece of that, but probably only 20-25% of it is actually having a technology platform like MDG to really help enforce and enable the business users to work with it. So there's an first thing you've got to figure out is who's going to own the data, what the roles and responsibilities are, what are the standards and KPIs and things you're going to measure about it, and then how do I manage the change across the organization. You've got to build out the process to go through and get the data right to start with. So you need to build the data, kind of get it fixed and figured out. And then, what kind of service levels, agreements, et cetera, are you going to have in place for the sustain phase, which is how you're going to actually keep it clean once you've got the technology platform deployed to support that. So it's really about people, process, the technology is certainly a key part of that, and what's the overall organization. And we spend an awful lot of our time helping with this top part. Sooner or later, we typically do ultimately talk about getting a technology platform deployed that will work effectively. But really, a lot of our early stage advisory services are around the first 80% of getting the right people to the table, making sure everybody understands what their job is and how they're going to, actually this is going to benefit them, and then finally how to bring them into a single kind of technology platform that they can all work with and trust and feel like it's something that lets them cooperate effectively. And that'd be the last thing, is really looking at some sort of roadmap. And you'll see different versions of this. Gartner and Forrester certainly have their versions. This is something we see that's pretty specific to a standard kind of data governance program being rolled out at a medium to large size organization, where you've got to kind of start with your strategy. You've got to take a swat at finding out what the current state is of your data. Is it good? Is it bad? Recent company I worked with found out that, we found out while working with them that they had only populated 3 fields in their SAP plant maintenance system out of about 50 that they needed to actually do their job. So we didn't realize that, and the organization didn't even really realize that. The plant maintenance guys certainly did, but broader at the executive level, until we had actually done a health assessment of some of their data and produced reports with their own data and shown what was good, what was bad, and kind of the current state. Then you actually get into trying to clean up the data, so you're actually, building and fixing it. And then finally, you're rolling out a master data management to help sustain that, and a little bit of program management. So you've got some executive sponsorship and an overall steering committee. But this is very much a maturity type model, which you'll see of how to approach these things. And we offer services both from an advisory and hands-on standpoint across each one of these. And typically companies will tackle probably the strategy and the health assessment. They'll do that in parallel. They'll often do the data cleanup and the data quality piece. Often in the same time they're standing with their master data management system, and overall helping build out, working with SAP. Often we do a lot of work of actually building out value cases and business cases to take to executive leadership to make sure they have buy-in and the funding for these sort of programs. And that's pretty much it. At the end of the day, a few key takeaways of how to get something like this rolling is focus on small incremental projects. Don't try to boil the ocean. Really think about the data model and who needs it and what they want to do out of it. So people can say, yes, this is what I want. Make sure the right people are in place. And again, MDM is sort of a lifestyle change. It's really starting to introduce, pick the key fields, pick the key systems to get your quick wins, as we talked about, and get people used to the system, and then slowly but surely introduce more and more capabilities. That's why assets is a very good area to start with typically, and then you can tackle things like finance or customer or material or other areas inside the organization. And at the end of the day, it's just making sure that it's sustainable by tying back your business processes, your business value, and reporting back to the data, and then tracking, very importantly, tracking the results you're seeing. So you're showing that, hey, as you're cleaning up the data and spending money on something like this, the reporting is getting better, business users are happy with the data, people that are working in the field are getting their jobs done better, so you've got the right KPIs and metrics that prove that a program like this is valuable. With that, Jody, I'm going to pause. That kind of takes us through the prepared part of the presentation, but happy to pause and see if we collected any questions, or if anybody has any in real time, happy to address them.
We did receive a few questions that came in while you were presenting. The first one is, which system should serve as the master? What if the primary data isn't in SAP?
It's a great question. We had an interesting case, a real-world example of this, where we were meeting with a client, and they had some very unique needs around linear asset management. It was utility, and they said they actually use their GIS system typically as the first point of entry once they're in the kind of sustain mode for this sort of thing, and they viewed that as the master for many types of data. They started with where is it and worked their way backwards to what is it and what needs doing to it. And so that goes back to this notion of a system like a master data system that can handle the synchronization and the harmonization across those systems, because it's perfectly valid if you're line technician for a utility company, and you're out in the field and you have a handheld device with a geo front end that you want to touch the screen and say, here's right where I am, here's a problem I report, I'd like to raise this as an issue. To you, the GIS, the map you're working off of, is your entry point into everything that you do, which is much different than maybe the person on the back end who's going to come into an SAP or other ERP system and actually fix the underlying data that says, hey, this is an ABC transformer instead of an XYZ transformer. So it depends on your where you are in the business, but the key is that each one of these systems need to talk to each other and have a unified workflow so that you can actually work effectively.
The next question I have is, how do I get a program like this started or kicked off?
Another great question. I think I probably got that one before we got to the last slide that we saw there, but what I've seen in the decade plus that I've really been helping companies do this is find something that's broken now, that's causing a good bit of pain, and figure out how to fix it and show measurable incremental improvements in that area. And then once you've gotten buy-in and funding for that specific issue that you're tackling, then you can actually begin to expand out your footprint from there. And I've seen companies go from nothing to formal data governance with full executive sponsors at the C-level in 18 to 24 months from getting that initial win to building out a full data governance program with top-level sponsorship. So I'd say start small, find something that's broken, show that you're fixing it and adding value to the business. Get the business to help you is the other key piece. So you've got a business sponsor and an IT sponsor typically is the other big thing there.
The next question is, how can I get needed data from my documents, drawings, etc. into SAP?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I mean, that's always a struggle, and as I mentioned, this is something we spend a huge amount of time helping customers with. There are some technologies that come from SAP inside products like data services that can take unstructured data and move it into structured environments, but it typically takes, you've got to have someone who's got a lot of good skills with that. So Utopia, I think, is uniquely positioned because we've delivered hundreds of projects doing exactly that, to have the processes and the pre-built technologies that leverage the SAP solutions that allow you to very quickly get that data, identify it, and pull it in using a combination of, again, technology and highly skilled resources that we have both onshore and offshore through our Bangalore
facility. The next question I have here is, data is collected for processing in future and getting decisions faster. How does in-memory processing benefit in asset management?
No, that's another great question. I'll take a specific example. We often are doing, it seems like a lot of times our entry point into organizations is around assets and perhaps SAP plant maintenance. But what we're seeing is more and more organizations are moving as fast as they can from reactive plant maintenance, which is, I know I'm going to need to fix this thing, or oops, something just broke, or whatever the case may be, to really moving to more of a real-time predictive system so they can say, I think this boiler, or this heat exchanger, or this generator, whatever it is going to fail, and I can see the trend in that. And in order to do that, you really got to have a really sophisticated, in-memory system that can hold a lot of different real-time transactions that are coming in, hopefully coming in off sensors directly off the production floor or the utility power plant floor, and then being analyzed. But you also need to have all the correct valid data in terms of maintenance intervals, tolerances for that piece of equipment. I'm thinking of boilers and heat exchangers in my mind right now when I'm thinking about it, so that where your warning factors are, so that you can begin to do things like using SAP HANA for predictive maintenance and some of those sort of solutions. So I think that's really where we're switching is going in that direction.
Okay, I do have a few more questions here to go. Can you give me some examples of project successes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've mentioned several. Absolutely, we've got a lot of success in oil and gas recently using this solution, handling things like EPC handover. We've got several really active projects at the moment that I can think of that are around materials and MRO, and really, helping go out and get the data right in terms of the spare parts that are needed for plant maintenance and for, other reasons. If organizations are actually building things, how do you make sure you got the short and long descriptions correct? Really, the data can be counted on by the business, and they feel a lot of confidence in the data. So EPC handovers, when we're heavily engaged on that I can think of right now. A lot of work around, like I said, working with spare parts and materials and cleaning up that sort of data. And then finally, there's many other projects actually just going in and collecting these business requirements, getting MDG rolled out across different domains, whether it be material, customer, finance, asset in this case, and making sure that it supports the business processes correctly. So those are the three areas that I know of that Utopia has been very deeply engaged with in 2015 with many, many large companies all over the world, really, Europe, Middle East, the U.S., et cetera.
The next question is, how have you seen the tie for asset master data used in accounting depreciation?
Oh wow, there's one. I think I'm gonna sort of tap dance a little bit there and say what I would assume is it goes back to you can't apply depreciation to an asset unless you have the correct depreciation intervals set in the system itself, the right type of asset in place. So I think it really goes back to having the asset data correct with the correct metadata and associated data. And as a matter of fact, a lot of SAP customers use MDG for finance to help facilitate that on the FICO side of things or the COPA side of things to tie those systems together. So I think one of the big benefits here would be if you're using SAP, which most of our customers are, you really have the ability through ECC to tie together those different systems, and then the MDG piece would be in place for the finance domain and the asset domain to ensure all the data you need there, because you can't do depreciation or other sorts of automated sorts of things you want to do unless you've got all the base data in place across the two parts of the system.
This next question is, who should the primary owner of the master data, IT or the business side?
Yeah, I think we've covered this one, so I won't spend too much time on it. But the short answer is both, and you saw that slide there with, we typically say that I think 75% of the requirements and the knowledge that's needed to correctly set up master data systems come from the business. But I think the business often looks at IT as the one that quote unquote owns master data, right or wrong, good or bad. That seems to be where it sort of lands. But if I was someone, I would not take ownership of the master data if I was on the IT side, if I did not have the business heavily engaged. I did not have data stewards in place from the business to act as the specialists when new requirements and requests came up, et cetera. So I think it's both, but I think it just depends on the business requirements.